Hello and welcome to Moneycontrol. You have tuned into IPO Wrap for the week, and I'm your host, Nikki Mirchandani. Of course, this week around, it's been a lackluster week for IPO, but the coming week or the next week, we'll have at least 4 IPOs open up for subscription. There will be 2 main board and 2 SME IPOs. When we talk about the main board IPOs, one of that will be DOMS Industry, and the other one would be India Shelter Finance Corporation. Both of the issue size for these IPOs is around 1200 crore, and both of these open for subscription on December 13th. But to take the discussion forward, we've been joined by Asta Jain, the Senior Research Analyst at HEM Securities, M Securities. Hello, so much for taking out the time and having this conversation right up with us. But let's talk about the first main board IPO. By the way, before I could start off, Asa, did you know that India is perhaps the global leader, at least in 2023, when in terms of the number of IPOs that it's come up with in 2023? I mean, it's the global leader out there.
Yes, hi Nikki. Good afternoon, everyone out there, and to you as well. Yes, we are the leaders, and I think I can better acknowledge this fact because we are into the SME IPO. We work as a merchant banker for many SME IPOs, if you have seen. So, kind of interest which we are seeing right now, not only from the retail investors, but from institutional investors also, because previously it was not the case. So now in the main board IPOs, we have always seen that retail, institutional, both category of investor they have shown strong interest, but now in the SME space also institutional investors are showing strong interest. So it itself is a proving the fact that how much the people are moving towards this IPO. They are really liking it, and they are finding it as a attractive destination to deploy the funds in, both for the short term as well as for the long term.
I mean, the markets are also doing well per se. Nifty today has scaled 21,000 mark, but I'm sure there are enough and more offerings also which are at play. But let's discuss DOMS Industries first. That's the first one. It's the second largest pencil maker perhaps, which is coming up with an IPO to an extent of 1,200 crore. And it's at a price band in the range of 750 to 790 per share. And it's a Valsad-based company, which essentially, if you give a split of the 1,200 crore, 850 crore is for OFS and another 350 crore is for fresh issue. The company intends also to part finances for its capex requirements, setting up new manufacturing facility, production capabilities in the wide range of writing instrument watercolors. But I'm going to start up by asking you whether you have a subscribe or a avoid to this one. If it's a subscribe, then why?
Okay, so talking about DOMS, I think we are very much already made the report and it will going to be released soon. So I have given a subscribe rating to this IPO. So we are recommending to subscribe this IPO both from the listing gain purpose as well as long-term purpose. Now the reasons behind it. First of all, as you have already told, they are into the stationery making, and I tell you, they enjoy 12% market share if we talk about their product profile, because they are into the scholastic stationery, they are into the art stationery, etc. So they enjoy 12% market as of FY23. So first of all, they are the second largest leader in this category. Secondly, if I talk about their brand value, their brand recall is very high. If you talk about domes, you can see in any household where there are kids from 2 to 10 years of age. In my case also, I want to share it as my daughter is small. So we have this domes in our house also. So they have covered the kids and from all the age group, starting from 12 to starting from 2 to 10 years. So in fact, their brand recall is quite high. Now talking about their financial performance, it is very strong. If I talk about their CAGR growth in the top line, bottom line, it is more than 50% in all the a line of items. If I talk about operating profit also, so their CAGR growth is very high. They enjoy very strong margin because operating margin as well as net profit margins are on the higher side with the strong ROCE and ROE levels. So all this makes the case for a strong fundamental of a company, and that's why we are giving subscribe rating to this IPO.
Sure. I would also want to ask you, Asta, if there is any kind of risk that we're looking at. Sure, you've spoken about enough and more strength profiling of the company. When you talk about the financials, you talk about the products, historical performance this far has been great. But any two factors per se which seem like a problematic area in this one, and also talk about the valuations in that case.
Okay, so in their product portfolio, they sell lead pencils by the brand of C3. So it contributes 30 to 35% of their revenue. So and this holistic stationery, which I have already told you, it consists of more than 45% of their revenue. So I think they are deriving, major part of their revenue from these products. So there can be a concentration risk, but again, I'm not seeing it as a concentration risk, because going ahead also, what we feel, that this company has a strong facility. They have already, has a strong manufacturing facility, and they have set up their facility in such a manner that they can easily switch to the other products, because this field is very much dynamic, and it keeps on changing. 5 years before, we don't use the type of colors which our kids are using right now. So this field is quite dynamic, and it keeps on changing, but their facilities are such that they can easily switch to the other product as soon as there is a requirement of that. So although there is a risk of a product concentration, but going ahead also, with the setup of strong facilities at their end, they try to mitigate this risk.
Sure. I would also want to ask you, Asta, within the if you see in Flair Writing came with an IPO, then you had Cello World, which came up with an IPO essentially. I mean, Writing saw some good premium also, 66%, and Cello World also saw 28% premium. Are these really like categories? If we were supposed to compare between these three players, is that going to be a fair comparison?
No, that not will be a fair comparison, which I believe, because player is basically into the pen. But if I talk about domes, then they are into the scholastic stationery, art stationery. They are into the clays also. The kids use clay in order to make certain toys, etc. So it is like the product category is different. So I cannot say that they are the strict pairs. Although not at the closer level, but at a broader level, we can compare it when we have to see about the valuation. But on an apple to apple basis, I cannot say, and I don't think that a player is an actual player of the company, because the product category is different.
Sure, Asta. I wouldn't really know much on the color side of it or the clay side of it. Because I lack complete, creativity when it comes to the drawing and all of that. So completely away from all of that. But I'm also going to ask you in terms of the other one USP for this company. If one, you said it's a subscribe, right? Just based on that, one USP for the company that you think can stand out for this one?
So a leadership position with a strong manufacturing facility, I think that is one of the USP of the company, and the second largest market share.
All right, that's pretty much the word coming in for DOMS Industries. But I'm also going to be chatting about India Shelter Finance Corp. I'm sure we've yet to scan through it and yet to go through, the financials of the company and the business profile of the company. Essentially, it is an affordable housing finance company which is fixed at a price band of 469 to 493 a share for a 1200 crore IPO. The IPO is essentially fresh issue comprises of 800 crore and OFS to an extent of 400 crore. The proceeds again are going to be utilized for meeting in the future capital requirements for onwards, the onward lending and for general corporate purposes. Asa, not really sure, but have you really managed to look at the basic scratch, the basic surface of this one?
So before commenting on this IPO, I would like to say that there is one thing in the DOMS IPO, the valuation, which I have not discussed in detail. So yes, prima facie, the valuation looks steep. So this is my advice to all the retail investors, as well as to all the other investors also, like HNI, that invest in this IPO, subscribe this IPO, but expect some decent returns, because the kind of markets we are into. So don't expect a very extraordinary high returns. It might or might not happen, but yes, I'm sure that decent returns can be expected out of this counter, because valuations are, they have fully valued the issue. This is what I can say for the domes. So keeping that into the mind, just subscribe to this IPO for the decent listing gains, and for the long term also. Now talking about the other IPO, that is the India
Okay,
Shelter
Asta,
Finance.
just hang on to that thought for a bit before we move on to India Shelter. You made a point where you spoke about valuations being at a little upper side or a little more expensive because of which you've tamed the expectation of having a decent gain coming in for this one. And also, you've said that it's a long term play, but the valuations look to be a little more expensive. As compared to the peers, what's the kind of percent premium that this company is looking at? And also, if you could put out like to like comparison for this one.
So basically, why I'm talking about the valuation, because they are coming at a P multiple of 32. This is, I'm talking about post-issue equity, in which we have analyzed their latest results also. So on that basis, 32 is the P multiple which they are commanding right now. So I think if I compare it to the Flare, which is the, I mean, recently listed one, although I've already told you that Flare is not a exact comparable to this company, but still if I took it as a compare, then I think, I mean, Flair is also quoting right now the 32 PE multiple. So after having this much of a jump from the listing or the issue price of 304, Flair is quoting around 370 right now. So after having this much of jump, then also Flair is quoting 32 PE multiple. So this is what I want to say here, that it looks fully priced, not expensively, but yes, fully priced right now. And that's why I'm advising, subscribe to this issue, expect a decent gain, maybe a higher gains can also be expected, but please keep the expectation to a decent level. Then it always good to invest in the IPO.
So,
So
when do you say decent level, what's the kind of percent that we're looking at? Because bulls have been completely dominating the street, and even the definition of decent in the recent time has changed. So, in that case, what's the percent of gains that we're looking at, or one can look at the time of listing?
although it is very tough to comment on what kind of
Sure.
listing gain we can expect, so I'm just having an idea on the basis of my calculations, because we have made excel sheet formats, we have done all the calculations. So what I feel is that 20 to 25% minimum returns we can expect on this IPO. So it can move beyond that also, but again, I am advising, keep the, I mean, expectations on a decent level, which is 20 to 25% premium. It can list beyond that premium also. There is no doubt in that. But I think it can be expected. 20 to 25% can be easily, we can easily expect on this counter to post as a premium to the issue price on the day of a listing.
All right, so just summing up the conversation for our viewers there, the subscribe rating, the valuation seemed to be expensive at 32 times. Expect decent listing gains to an extent of 20 to 25% for this one, but the kind of market share that the company has been enjoying thus far seems to be the moving factor for DOMS, at least when it comes to ASTA. But I'm going to be also highlighting and moving on to now India Shelter Finance Corporation, listing in few strengths that we have for this IPO. It's one of the fastest growing AUM amongst the housing finance companies in India. It's got one of the fastest high yields, granular retail focused portfolio. It's also technologically and analytically driven company with scalable operating models, extensive and diversified distribution network with significant presence in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Apart from that, also diversified financing profile with a demonstrated track record of reducing finance cost. Asta, coming on this one, your basic assessment just on this.
Although I have not looked into this IPO as of now, but yes, the housing finance which they are into, it is really gaining traction nowadays. This industry is really on the rise. So if the valuations will fall in place, and if other parameters which we look before investing or before recommending to invest in any IPO, then we can say that it can be a good counter, but we really need to analyze. So maybe next week I can talk about it. But right now I can say the company which the industry which the company is operating right now is looking very strong.
It's quite off the table, but let's have you managed to see the gains that IREDA scaled up today in today's session? Some good number there. We saw decent amount of gains coming in for IREDA also. Have you got a chance to look at it from the rally that we've seen thus far for the stock? What kind of business profile does the company actually now look at? What do you suggest on that one?
So when IREDA came, then we have given a subscribe rating to this IPO, both for the listing in purpose as well as long-term purpose, because they are into financing of the I should say, I mean, renewable projects or the green energy projects. Green energy here refers to all those projects that are basically into, mitigating the climatic risk, environmental risk. So this kind of industry is really at a boom right now because it is getting interest from all categories of investors. Apart from this, what we have seen that India has also a strong target for because India want to become a strong player in the renewable energy. So looking after that, I think the market is very strong for this company. The industry growth is looking very strong, and plus the valuation at which they have bought the IPO, that was also reasonable. So that is also one of the reason that why we have seen such a huge rise in the price of this counter, because the valuations were reasonable, and from there we have seen a ample return. So I mean, this counter is still looking good to us. It is a good long-term story also. So those who have gotten the allotment and they have still not sold out their shares, I recommend them to continue hold because it can show further moments. But those who want to put their fresh money into this counter, I recommend them to wait for some more time. Let the stock correct little bit because it has already risen a lot. Then only invest in this counter. So buying on dip strategy for the freshers, but those who have there in the allotment, they can continue to hold this counter.
All right. Just in today's trade, the stock has rallied as much as 14 odd percent. Splendid listing also. And for the ones who are still looking and wondering what this company is all about, it's country's renewable energy focused state-owned non-banking finances financial company that we're talking about. But Asta, we're just going to leave it at that. And we're also going to be talking about. Thank you so much for taking out the time and having this conversation with us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right, we are also going to be talking about the SME IPOs, right? There are two main boards that we discussed in. One, of course, we spoke about India Shelter Finance, and apart from that, we spoke about DOMS Industries, where there is a subscribe rating, and also, for that matter, valuation seems to be on the upper side. Decent listing gains to an extent of 20-25% thereabouts can be expected. But in terms of SME IPO, the initial public offering of Prestonic Engineering will open for subscription on December 11th, closes on December 13. The company essentially manufactures metro rail rolling stock products and metro rail signaling product, infra products essentially, and FJ Logistic IPO. That's going to be the second one that you need to keep an eye out on. Again, an SME IPO book build issue to an extent of 48 crore. The issue is entirely a fresh issue and opens for subscription on 12th, closes on 14th, and the price band for SJ Logistic IPO is set in the price range of around 121 to nearly 125 per share. But that's all that we have for the IPO wrap. This time around, for the month of December, you will see 6 offerings as compared to 7 that we've seen. And thus far, we've seen 21 in 2023. But on that note, it's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in.